and welcome to Early Childhood Ireland's podcast, which features interviews and discussions on all issues relating to high quality in the early years and school age care sector. In our episodes, we have a range of speakers who are leaders in the areas that matter to Early Childhood Ireland members. And this podcast series is proudly supported by Aricus Insurance, which offers a comprehensive range of cover at discounted premiums for both business and personal insurance products. So have a look at www.aricus.ie for more information. So in this series of the podcast, we're looking at communicating. We're familiar with the Reggio Emilia term, the 100 languages of children. So over the coming episodes, we're going to be looking at some of the ways in which children communicate. And for this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr Francesca La Morgia. Francesca is the Director of Mother Tongues, which is a social enterprise working to promote multilingualism and intercultural dialogue in Ireland through a creative arts-based approach. She has an MPhil in Applied Linguistics from Trinity and a PhD in Bilingual Language Acquisition from DCU. And she's lectured in language development across various universities, including the University of Reading, Trinity College, Ulster University, and Maynooth University. And Francesca's work within Mother Tongues focuses on learning, research, and policy development across education and the arts. So it's a lovely fit with Reggio Emilia in that sense. And we're in Early Childhood Ireland, we're doing a number of projects with Mother Tongue. So Francesca, thanks so much for joining us today to talk about communicating.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So Francesca, before we move into some of the areas we talked about covering, can you tell us maybe a little bit more about the work of Mother Tongues?
Mother Tongues was founded with the idea of, as you said earlier, promoting multilingualism in Ireland, and really specifically with the aim of creating a benefit for the children who are growing up in Ireland multilingually, bilingually. And we know from statistics, we know from research that in every classroom, there'll be about 20% of children in any early year setting or primary school classroom, there'll be 20% of children who are growing up speaking more than one language. And I really look forward to hearing the full results of the new census to see how that might have shifted. And this, I predict, having looked at the preliminary results, that it's only going to be increasing. And it's at Irish level, but also definitely a European level. I suppose the goal of Mother Tongues is to raise awareness of the importance of bilingualism for the child. The fact that we still have a lot of misunderstandings about bilingualism is something that we address very much when we do our talks, when we speak to parents, when we speak to early childhood educators. One of our primary roles is to dispel some of the myths that are still going around that make parents sometimes give up their home language, their mother tongue, in favor of English, but that also create an environment sometimes where parents feel that they shouldn't be speaking their language because maybe the neighbor is commenting negatively about it, because the GP might be telling them, look, your child might end up being confused, or that might cause extra worries in relation to speech and language development, and where educators may be unsure on how to advise parents. So our role is partly to support anybody who has questions about multilingualism, bilingualism, about language development. And that is anybody who surrounds the child at any stage in the early development. But it's also to create programs that celebrate multilingualism, because we want our message not only to go to those who are concerned and who now need the help right away, but also we want our message to be a societal message that a country like Ireland, which is in itself legally multilingual because it's got 3 native languages, we want everybody in the community, in the country, to be very positive, very open when it comes to addressing these issues of multilingualism. So we need everybody to be on board.
So you mentioned 3 languages there, Francesca?
Yeah,
Irish,
English, and Irish Sign Language are official languages.
I'm sorry, I forgot sign language, of course. Okay, isn't it so sad that parents feel pressure to give up their home language? And I think that's a good place to start the conversation is, you know, how in early years and school age settings can we create an environment where multilingualism is valued, that welcomes multiple home languages, and you know, that supports children's speech and language development and helps to, you know, you mentioned some of the myths there. You know, how can we work to dispel some of those myths around children becoming confused, that children's language development will be held back? What are your thoughts on creating that kind of an environment?
So sometimes when we speak to people who may say those kind of things, who may say, oh, you shouldn't be speaking 2 languages to your child because they might end up being confused, I might often ask, where did you hear that? Where did you read that? And it's always, the answer is always, oh, someone said this. It's never, I read this in my textbook, or I got a flyer from the local health center telling me this. So that's already telling us that these myths are things that we've been saying to each other. And language is only one of the areas. I'm not going to get into but it's, I'd say one of the things that we sometimes do is saying, where do you think this information is coming from? Are you sure about what you're saying? And when we try to figure out why people are saying these things, it's again, there seems to be fear around speaking more than one language. There is fear, and I can speak on behalf of the parents in this context. And I'm a parent myself, and it's only natural to wonder, okay, I was not raised speaking 2 languages, so I cannot ask my parents, how did they do it? I can't ask my friends because their situation is different. I heard maybe somebody saying X, Y, and Z. So I would feel, and we see a lot of parents feeling lost because they don't know if what they're doing is good for their children. So starting from this point, we know that parents, and we've seen it with our own research that we did on mother tongues, parents don't lack the skills at all. They lack the confidence. And sometimes their confidence is undermined by someone's commenting on the situation. And in our survey, we asked parents to be even more specific about what was said to them and who said it. And we found that sometimes it was specialists, so people that the parents trust, like someone who has a degree in education, a degree in medicine, a degree in, pediatric or in early childhood education, pediatrics, so that the parent thinks this person is the expert. And if the expert says, are you sure you want to speak Italian to your children? Why don't you start with English, which is more important? Many parents, no matter how educated, how much they've read about it, they will question themselves. And so these comments we know that all of these comments come from a good place. They come from wanting to help, from wanting the best for the child, always. I mean, there may be rare occurrences of someone wanting to, I can't imagine. It's always coming from a very good place.
It's highly unlikely. It's just
it's always coming. It's always coming from a good place of prioritizing the well-being of the child. And that's why we're here. That's why we exist, because we know that professionals often come to us looking for more information, looking for reassurance, looking for sometimes research that can help them to inform parents. So I think a really important role of the educator, for example, is to reassure parents that, number one, a child who grows up bilingually or with 3 languages, we see this becoming more and more common, that child is benefiting from listening to different sounds, incorporating 2 languages, and so on and so forth. If parents are concerned, or they naturally can be concerned, it is very good to open a dialogue in an early childhood setting where parents feel comfortable coming to you to ask, what's going on with my child? I'm seeing that English is coming into my home more and more since my child started this to be surrounded by English speakers. Should I worry about this? Should I be speaking, one question that parents constantly ask is, should I be speaking English at home to help my child to develop English so that my child can be at the same level as the others? Or maybe the question is around integration and play. And I'm totally aware that it's not an easy question to answer, because the instinct might be to say, well, yes, if you help me, if you speak English at home, you're giving me help because I have an easier job here in the setting. But every time a parent chooses to speak English instead of their mother tongue, they're taking time away from their mother tongue. And we know from research, we know from our own evidence, that the more parents start to speak English, the more they tend to then ultimately give up their mother tongue, because their child's English will always grow, will always develop one way or another if they're immersed in it in the Irish context. And what
Can't be stopped.
It cannot be stopped. But what ends up losing out is the mother tongue. And the short term is, sometimes it's difficult to see what are the repercussions of this, because you're only often, when you have a very young child, you're concerned about your day-to-day. But we're lucky at mother tongues that we also meet families with 15 and 16-year-olds. And the 16-year-old goes back to the parent and says, why did you not speak that language to me? Now I'm completely cut off from the extended family. So we need to be aware of how important our advice is when we're speaking to parents, because the decisions that they're going to make at a linguistic level, which is also very intimate, it's very close to family decisions. It's not an easy decision to make to not speak your language. Those decisions will impact the child in the very long term. So
it's a huge repercussion
it's huge.
To lose touch with a country of origin, extended family. It's, cousins not being able to communicate with each other, grandparents and grandchildren not being able to communicate. It's a huge, maybe unintended, maybe unthought of consequence, but it's massive.
Yeah. And actually, because we talk about this all the time, I suppose we hear such a range of stories. And we never say you should force parents to speak their mother tongue, because, again, it's a very personal choice. And we do come across families that choose not to speak their language to their children for very important personal historic reasons. Usually they're related to maybe traumatic circumstances associated with how they identify their culture. So again, it's not an easy, clear-cut, this is what you should say to parents. I think in our view, it's really opening up the dialogue and saying, look, in this setting, we welcome every single language. We might sing songs in different languages. And whether you want to or not, there's that freedom to actually have a space for who your child is. We're celebrating your child's identity in all of its aspects, and maybe language is an important aspect of it, and it often is.
And Francesca, how, sometimes language can be a barrier, if parents aren't fluent in English and the educators in a setting aren't fluent, and they can't be in every mother tongue. Have you suggestions and ideas on how educators can help to communicate that value and that respect when language is a barrier?
I think in a way, I mean, this is a big question. In a sense, if there's no shared language, there can be some very straightforward tools to send a message out to a family. If the message is, you want to communicate to the parents that you are in favor of, for example, bringing in books from their home, which may not be in English, and you'd be surprised, the parents will even question that, and they'll say, why do you ask me to bring a Polish book when actually my child is there to learn English and to be like everyone else, So you want to send out this message of welcome, of like that you actually value the culture, the language, the diversity that you have in your setting, not just as a nice thing, but because it's an integral part of the learning experience, of the emotional experience of the child. And of course, I'm saying this in maybe complex words, but there are simple messages that can be written down in English and translated in the languages you have, even by using basic online tools. They won't give you the fantastic professional translation, but they will definitely get the message across. Sometimes there are ways of using voice notes, and maybe a voice note can be easier for a parent who maybe doesn't read written language, or a written note can be really boiled down to a sentence that is the core of your message that the parent themselves can translate easily. Because sometimes our language of our that we use for writing sometimes is very complex, but the core message is very simple. It could be bring a book in your language. In this setting, we read in all languages. And this is so simple in structure. I mean, it can be simpler that even someone who is used to be using Google Translate on their phone on a daily basis can just translate that and feel that there is a two-way communication, because they might decide that they can send you a message in the same way that you can also translate. And if this is a real language barrier, there are also language barriers in the sense that sometimes we speak the same language, but we're not saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And where I might say something in a very Italian way, and maybe it doesn't come across the way I'd like it to come across, because I mean, I think in the 20 years I've learned how to say things in an Irish way. But if I was being me 20 years ago, I think I've offended a lot of people. So there are, and these are not languages, more like communication and like pragmatic issues on how we get a message across. And again, if we're working in a context that is multicultural, we're not only opening ourselves up to different languages, but also to different ways of communicating, to different approaches, to understanding that the way when I went to preschool, it's nothing to do with now my children's experience. And Italy is quite similar to Ireland to a certain extent. But you have to really understand that for parents, this experience of bringing their children into a different education system, potentially through a language that's not your language, is a very strong experience. And I think it all makes up the bigger picture. And I know we focus on language only, but when we talk of multilingualism, we also talk about bringing in not only language, but cultural aspects. And I think there's something that came to my mind as you were speaking earlier, which is that sometimes we put a lot of focus on what we should be saying or what we should be advising and what's the best for the parents, and to think, we think obviously we want to solve problems as quickly as possible, and we think that parents know already how to deal with multilingualism and that they love their mother tongue and that they want to keep it up. But so often we've heard, especially in primary schools, of principals telling us that when they were asking parents, just as a way of welcoming parents, they were saying, well, tell us what language you speak. And the parents said, we speak English, because they didn't want to be seen by the most important person in the school, in a way, to be doing something bad for the child. So that's why this dialogue is so important, because if we ask the question, what are the languages you speak in your family, which is key in my view, it should be asked to every child that you see, no matter what they sound like, no matter what they look like. You know, my children, you couldn't tell that they can speak Italian. It's not written on their face, and their English is a very Dublin English, so you couldn't tell that they also speak Italian. So that question is fundamental, and it has to go out to all the families. And it's important to explain that you're asking that question not as a means of judging parental behavior. It's because it's going to be enriching your practice.
And there's a bit there, isn't there, about confidence, having the confidence to ask and maybe probe a little bit, you know, to have the confidence to explain why you're asking that you're not being intrusive or nosy. It's, you know, because you value the different cultures and traditions that children have at home. And that's, I suppose, that confidence needs to be supported in families and educators alike. And that bit of, you know, we talked previously about not making assumptions, that, you know, not assuming that because a child speaks, as you say, Dublin English, that's always the home language. You know, I heard a story of a setting that did ask that question, and Spanish was written down. So they assumed the child was Spanish, but in fact, the child was from South America. The child wasn't Spanish. So, you know, isn't there that bit of teasing that out and helping children, I suppose, as they get older too, to value and see as something unique and good that they speak a different language. You know, there's a blog that we have on our website where Maya Has-Brosnan talks about her child not, you know, being reluctant to reveal, in inverted commas, that they spoke Danish at home.
And I am a parent as well, so I sometimes it's difficult to split the professional with the personal.
Of course.
Because in a way, I can tell you, it breaks your heart when your child decides that they don't want to speak your language. And you know, as a professional, you know, it's a phase. You know that you're like, oh, I'm sure they're not embarrassed. I'm sure they're doing fine. I'm sure the language is great. But this is a moment where their identity at some point they might want to feel like everyone else, or they might want to say, well, my teacher is praising everybody for how good their English is, so maybe I should be speaking English more. You know, the child is in a social setting and they're trying to figure out who they are in all of these different social settings they're in. I've heard of children also speaking Irish, feeling very happy to speak Irish at home, and then going to girls' school and feeling a bit puzzled for the first couple of weeks, because like, is everyone else here speaking Irish? So the children are figuring out where they are, who they're with, what's the role of each language. And it's very difficult from a parent's perspective, I could say, to adjust to all these phases as well. So I think there's a lot of complexity in the situation, which touches on language, but it touches on identity. It touches on, like, you know, some families will be talking a lot about this. They might say, you know, at home we speak languages X and Y, but you're going to be going to meet your friends tomorrow and you're going to be speaking English because everybody speaks English. So some parents are very open about describing what happens, and they have a dialogue with their child about it. In some families, the conversation doesn't take place, and parents themselves are scared of what might happen. And often we see it in the transition from preschool to primary, that while in preschool, the preschool years, parents have a little bit, sometimes they have more time to spend with their children, so they have more time to grow the language. We've seen very clearly also from research that was done in Trinity a few years ago, that through the course of primary school, children who were pretty confident in speaking and understanding the language of the parents shifted to English more and more. And emotionally for parents, this is also very difficult because you start to question yourself. That's the issue. The issue goes back to your confidence as a parent and how you see this situation in the global context of English being dominant as a language. So I'd always say for parents, obviously, to question what are they doing, to question in a positive way, try to understand what the child is going through, but never to give up their mother tongue. Because no matter what the child is doing in this time, in this specific moment, what the child is going through, then keep speaking your language and talk to your child also about why you do it, why you think it is important. And ultimately, the dialogue is there. And you can tell the educator who's in the room, yes, I do speak X and Y languages at home. And this is very important to us because, and I hope the dialogue is open on the other side as well, where the educator is saying, we want to hear your stories. We want to see pictures of the trip in another country. We want to hear the name of that food in the original language, in the pronunciation, because it enriches everyone's understanding of different languages and cultures.
And that will help children. I mean, I suppose, children want to fit in. They want to feel that they're, the same as their peers, and that the things that differentiate them are valuable things rather than things that would alienate them from their peer group. And I think, that's where educators have a key role in helping children see that this difference between them and their friends who speak only English at home is something to be valued and treasured and appreciated and celebrated.
Yeah.
So, educators have a very strong role in supporting that. So, Francesca, in terms of, the creative arts aspect, and, that's some of the work that we're doing with mother tongues on some of the projects that we're cooperating together on. Can you talk a little bit about how you use the creative arts to, support the valuing of heritage language and multilingualism?
Yeah, we're kind of giving artists the ownership over some of our, or at least the responsibility to deliver creative experiences for children and families. There are two aspects to our work. One is the OWL project that we're working on with Early Childhood Ireland.
And that's in this, the Late Toy Show project, isn't it?
Yes. And in this, it's early days, but we are investigating potential ways to introduce multilingual practices that are creative practices to engage with parents and to give educators tools that they might want to reuse in their own creative ways. And some of the project is based on storytelling, or we're figuring out aspects of incorporating storytelling in this project. And I suppose the arts are, and meaning when I say the arts, I mean creative expression, is a very powerful tool to involve all children, so that all children can take part and start from where they're at and do what they enjoy, but also to involve parents. And we find that in our other projects outside of this research collaboration with Early Childhood Ireland, we've seen that parents have really come on board of creative projects. They find that this is a special space where they can create with their child, where they're given time to do something that maybe in the home you don't have time to do, to be just yourself and your child making something nice in a group of people who are similar. So they're going through similar, they're questioning how they're parenting, they've got children the same age, they might have similar questions about what it's like to be a parent and in a foreign country. And again, we find that using craft, using music, using dance is really bringing people together. And so the role of the artist is to deliver this experience, so that parents don't have to think of their own activity themselves. They can be just guided by the artist. But I feel since we engage with artists who are themselves multilingual, for some children, this is a revelation a lot of the time. Seeing somebody who is an adult, who is not their parent, who's like a teacher to them, because they see that adult like a teacher, who says, I speak Portuguese, I speak Vietnamese, I speak Japanese, and this is who I am. And I'm going to show you that I have also another language. So it's that role model that we very much believe in. And that role model is delivering something that is fun, that is memorable, that has, like, usually we try to make a connection between the work that happens in that setting to the home. So the children bring something home, then they bring something from home into the setting. So we try to, we do believe that through artistic expression, we can create an environment that is very conducive to speaking different languages.
It's really giving complete life, if you like, to the concept of the 100 languages, and respecting and appreciating that language isn't just the spoken word or the written word, that there's so many other ways to express what you're feeling through, like you say, dance, music, visual arts, and so on. So it's going to be a wonderful project, and we really look forward to hearing and seeing and reading about the outcomes of it. So we really look forward to that. So Francesca, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been lovely talking to you and hearing that, the parental take on it, which is so valuable to hear expressed so articulately. And I think your thoughts and explanations and discussion will be informative and inspirational for many people. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to this episode of Early Childhood Ireland's podcast, which is proudly supported by Aricus Insurance. As always, if you enjoyed it, please subscribe and spread the word to your friends and colleagues, and stay tuned for our next episode.